Well, good morning, everyone. I think we are very fortunate to have the sun shining on us, perhaps for some of us the first time for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, carefully organized in order to synchronize with the first annual meeting to be held in this wonderful new Pichette Auditorium. And I hope you'll agree it's very handsome. It's a wonderful new facility for the college, as indeed are all the other facilities over here. And I know most of you will be going on tours to have a good look at them later. Of the £17 million of fundraising that we needed for the campaign in relation to this complex, just on 16.6 million of that has been raised. The vast majority of it cash already in the bank, and the outstanding being agreed documented pledges. So this means, of course, that this fabulous new complex has been virtually paid for in its entirety by the far-sighted generosity of alumni and friends of the college, for which we are very, very grateful. There is also a certain long-term contribution from the banks involved, which we'll need to repay, but of course we are confident and have the planning well in hand to do just that. The financing of this complex has been achieved without a single penny of our endowment being used. Our endowment, which was very, very small some years ago and has grown considerably over the last 10 to 12 years. And all of this has been achieved, of course, in the midst of what is probably the worst economic situation in the UK since the last war. So it is an ambitious undertaking. We feel it's a successful one. It couldn't have happened without the college having first got its house in order in a number of different ways. So I think many of you will be aware that for some time now we've had a solid financial base, we have good management disciplines, good governance, and now we have buildings and an infrastructure on which we can progress to build a future academic and college business in every sense. The facilities, as you'll understand, and I think appreciate, and indeed some of your comments this morning illustrate this, the facilities are giving the Pembroke community a real shot in the arm, and we are keen to exploit them. But I would like to just emphasize these wonderful facilities are just one step forward in the Pembroke story, although admittedly a very big step. There are important things we still have to do, particularly in 2 areas. Firstly, on the academic front, where I think we have 3 linked objectives in relation to undergraduates. Our academic performance needs to become more consistent. The profile of our intake needs changing, and we need to invest time, energy and money in outreach and access activity. We now have, as we ought to, many more graduate students in the college, but we badly need more scholarships for them and more accommodation. We fixed the undergraduate accommodation situation with the addition of these facilities. Graduate accommodation is still to be tackled. And we hope and believe that we should expand our cross-disciplinary research ambitions and activities within the college. The second main area that we've got to move forward on is to continue to build the endowment. Although I've said it's improved and increased recently, we're still some way off the mean for Oxford College's endowment, which is about £65 million, and we are in the low 40s. So we need to be up there because that will then throw off the endowment income to enable us to offer the sort of services that the typical Oxford College can do. It will also enable us to achieve a number of the things that I've hinted at already in the academic and accommodation front, and also to endow those existing fellowships in the college which currently are not endowed. And finally, we need a major communications exercise. We have got to get firmly across to the world the true positive message of the Pembroke of today and where the college is headed. So, I think there are many grounds for celebration today, but I would like you to note from the comments I've just made that there's no ground for complacency. There's absolutely no question of sitting back. We have got a very detailed and determined plan for the way forward. Now, each of my colleagues are going to speak in a little more detail about the things I've touched on, and we'll start first with the academic director. So I call on Dr. Mark Fricker. Thank you.
Good. Well, it's great to see you here. I'm going to try and put a little bit of flesh on some of those bones. So there are 4 areas that I'm going to talk to you about. One is indeed the access and outreach. The second is a little bit about the academic performance, the undergraduate level, a little bit on graduates, and then something more about the research activities that are going on in the college. So you may be aware, because there has been quite a lot of press interest in this, that Pembroke has pioneered some rather unique approaches to widening participation. So trying to get the able students from disadvantaged backgrounds to make realistic applications to places like Pembroke, Oxford, Russell Group universities. So we started, and it's really the activity of Peter Klaus, who is our new Access Fellow. He's not here today because he is actually in Manchester doing some Access work. And his initiative was to set up a little hub in London, in Hackney, at a college called B6. So 5 or 6 years ago, B6 was a sixth form. It was basically struggling to stay alive. And the initiative that they set up was called Pembroke, because it's actually Brook House College, so a little bit of conjunction of the two terms there to give us Pembroke London, based at B6 in Hackney. And just to give you an idea, all of these schemes that Pembroke is involved with differ from a lot of other outreach in that they are long-term, they're intensive, they're academically driven. It's taking the same sorts of values that we have in Pembroke and putting them back into the secondary education system. So it's a small scheme. It takes 25 students from this college. They have to apply to get onto the scheme. They get interviewed to get onto the scheme. Not all of them are successful. Once they are started on the scheme, there is an academic thread that runs throughout the year that Peter Klaus runs, and it's seminars and tutorials that take place in Hackney. They have some study skills sessions run by our own undergraduates and graduates who go down to Hackney. They have a 1-week residential summer school which is based in Pembroke. They have visits up to Pembroke as well during the course. And they have extracurricular visits to various sort of cultural things in London. And most recently, we set up an East End Classics Centre. So imagine B6, next door is the Murder Mile. This is a rough area of London, and they built a garden of the ancient world with statues, with a library, with a room for students to study classics, which is even more bizarre because, of course, we don't do classics in Pembroke. So this was Peter following his own enthusiasms. But almost take the academically most challenging and interesting thing you could possibly do and make it work. So what is the evidence that this really does work? It's now been running for 4 years. In 2011, they won a Times Educational Supplement Award for the outstanding provider of the award. They won another one this year for outstanding innovation. They may well win another one in 2013 as well, because we haven't stopped there. It's in Time magazine online, if you'd like to go and look at it. As soon as you start Googling these things, you will find a lot of press interest, and almost all of it is entirely positive. It is perceived that this is the right way of doing access. So we believe that this is the right way of doing things. This year in admissions, these are the numbers. So the cohort dropped down to 23, because if they don't work on this course, they get thrown off it. Of those, we had 9 that made applications to Oxbridge, 7 of them got interviews, 5 of them got places. Now, we never set the scheme up with that intent. And there are different ways you can look at it. One is, it really does work. The second one is, if you think of the secondary education system, if really that is all that it takes to get people who weren't thinking of applying to university to make a successful application to Oxford, there is hope. So, last year, so the 11-12 academic year, governing body made the really rather brave decision to do some more of these. So we're responsible for different bits of the country. We have an area around Manchester and we have Cheshire. So we've now set up 2 more of these hubs. And these we call Pembroke North. And there's one in South Cheshire Sixth Form College. There's another one under Ashton-under-Lyne at the moment. And the key things about it is the schools have to buy into it. So they have to appoint a Raising Aspirations coordinator. We started the academic programme with them, and it's got a similar feel to the one in Hackney. It needs a dedicated tutorial room, so that it looks a little bit like Oxford up there. And we've also started other centres. So the Theology Centre, and we will have an Oriental Studies Centre, and we're planning a Science Centre joint with Corpus. So that's where we've decided to go with this. These 3 schemes, we will probably deal with about 90 students. Now, I doubt we will be able to maintain that same success rate on 90 students. So the question is, how do you actually develop this scheme to make it work broader than just Pembroke College can manage? So just to give you an idea of the costs for us, it's around about 120k per annum. So this is the investment that Giles was talking about, is why do we need to raise the endowment? It's to throw off the income to support these sorts of schemes. So you need something like 3.5 million of endowment to do that. We have already got some support from the Tyler Foundation and the Henry Drucker Fund. If you wanted to do the whole of the UK, there are 30 other Oxford colleges. There are 20 Cambridge colleges. If everybody did 3 of these centres, the job would be done. So that would get something like 2,500 students through these schemes. That is pretty much all of the students that are around that are likely to get the A-level requirements that we would need. So although this looked like madness a couple of years ago, and go to Hackney and set up a classic centre, you can now see where our ambitions are going. So over the next year or 2, we are actually going to start going around the university, and I should say linking up with lots of other providers, Villiers Park, Sutton Trust, because you can't just do this on your own as one little college in Oxford. Okay, so that is if Oxford were to go down this route. The total cost is 3.6 million if all of the colleges did it. Again, I don't think that is complete lunacy for an institution like Oxford to think about. There's a little example of the TES Awards and key players in it. So that is Peter Klaus there. Oh, let's just go back, sorry. And the other key one just in the background, that's Ed Durbin. So Ed Durbin was one of the students that got involved in this scheme when he was reading history here. He got a first in history. He's now gone to Brookhouse to be their Raising Aspirations coordinator. So one of the things that we've noticed for our own students, they find this whole project extremely worthwhile, and indeed it now sets some of them on their own careers. Okay, a little bit about our own undergraduates. So some of you may be aware of the Norrington performance this year. It's not really what we would like to have. You may also hear that the Norrington table itself is a bit of a farcical entity. Now, of course, we're bound to say that when we're near the bottom of it. We're less likely to say when we're near the top. But I thought you ought to see why we think it is not a particularly useful indicator. So that is the average distribution across the whole university of thirds, 2 2s, 2 1s, and firsts. So this was Pembroke's performance this year. We got slightly fewer firsts than the average of the university. We got slightly more 2 2s. That was enough to put us into 30th place. Last year, we got slightly more, well, about the same firsts, but slightly fewer 2 2s. Now, the numbers here, there are difference of 5 firsts and 8 2 2s between those 2 years. So this year we're 30th, last year we're 13th. It's so noisy. 1 or 2 students makes an enormous difference. So although it's an area of concern, and we are certainly working away at what can we do to improve that position, I don't think people should think that there is a major issue that the college has somehow got disastrously wrong. We will be putting effort into that, but we are actually, I have to say, very proud of some of the students that got those 2 2s, because as you can imagine, with 18 to 22-year-olds, some of them go through some very troubled times. And what we don't want to do is well, we help them through that period, and we don't want to come down on them like a ton of bricks for reasons that are outside their control. So there are some actually very good success stories in the people in the 2-2s, and we do not want to lose that as a college. Equally, I'll put that nameless college that has a big tower near a bridge. They are top of the Norrington table. If you look, they also have 2-2s, so it's not really an issue there. This is the difference. They have significantly more firsts. So what should we be putting our effort into? And I think it's actually trying to raise the top end of the game rather than worrying so much about the bottom end of the game. So that's the sort of thing that we're thinking about over the next couple of years, is what can we do to really improve the attainment of the students when they actually get here? Some of that is down to the students that we recruit in the access process. Okay, so a lot of what I was talking there is what's going down. Oops, it's going to show the game away. Getting students in, widening participation, bridging support. When the students arrive, these are the subjects that we offer in the different divisions: medical science, maths, physical, life science, the social sciences, and the humanities. And this is another real achievement for us. So we are so pleased that physics is back. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. On the graduate side, PGRs are research students, they're doing their doctorates. PGTs are taught masters. We are beginning to evolve a more sophisticated strategy for our graduates because there are different mixes between the different divisions as to what do you need. So the sciences, medical sciences, maths, physics, chemistry, biology, tend to go for research students. Social sciences, an enormous number of taught courses like MBAs. Humanities have a lot of taught courses of which they feed into the research courses. So we need a different approach for our graduates. But we certainly need to attract more research students, and you'll see one of the major issues that the Master's already alluded to is funding. And there is going to be an enormous cliff when UK undergraduates with their debt pop out the far end of their undergraduate course are highly unlikely to be able to go on to graduate unless there are scholarships. So Pembroke and the university, in fact the whole of the UK sector, is incredibly nervous that there is going to be a massive knock-on effect of fees. And the different the strategies in the different divisions. So let me tell you what we are already planning on the scholarships. That's our total number of graduates, which has gone up. It's now at the level we would like it to be. That's the right balance to match with the university. Of those, we have a number, we've been increasing the number of DPhils. We're holding the number of taught masters courses roughly steady because we already have a lot of those. What governing body decided to do was to increase the number of graduate scholarships. So that is planned in all of the financial measures, and it will get us to fund a significant proportion, predominantly of the DPhil students. So that is our, if you like, our strategic objective. And again, just to put some numbers on it, the annual cost of that in today's money is just over 400,000 or 12 million of endowment. So again, it gives you an idea of why do we need to raise the endowment, to throw off the money to support the graduate scholarships. Now I should say that only funds the college side of a graduate scholarship. That's about 6k per scholarship. The actual cost for a student to run is somewhere between 20 and 25k. So the other half of these scholarships are going to be raised on the university side, and hopefully the whole lot mesh together so we have more fully funded graduate scholarships. And that becomes even more important when you consider our major competitors in the US already have lots of needs-blind, fully funded graduate scholarships. Okay, what else do we want to do? We want to mix our undergraduates and graduates so all of these really smart people can inspire all of these younger people. How do we do that? Well, we now have the facilities to do things like seminars and presentations in the lecture theatre, in all of the rooms that you're going to see. In addition, we've got joint social space. So we still have an MCR, we still have a JCR, now we have a cafe where the two can meet. So there's a lot of added benefit of these facilities on the academic side as well. Next level up, research environment. So traditionally the domain of the university and a little bit dependent on the different subject areas. So if you're science, you tend to be over in the labs. If you're humanities, you may well be in college. So what does the college do for visiting fellows, junior research fellows, senior research fellows, PDRAs or postdoctoral research assistants? So just to give you an idea, this is the structure of the university, normalised the number of undergraduates. So we've got roughly, it's getting up to, well now 60% equivalent numbers for the graduates, But look at that research component. These are all the people doing research on research grants. So nearly 30% equivalent numbers of students. So that's about 6,000. What's the situation currently in college? And I should say Pembroke is not unusual in this respect. We've only got 4% normalised. So we need to build that up. These are an extraordinary resource that has never traditionally had a college affiliation. So we would like an awful lot more of those people because they are doing a lot of the really exciting research. Okay, we then link them up with our fellows. Now we could just leave it as a little tiered structure, but what we would like to do is get the benefit from the expertise and also the fact in a college you have people from different subject areas. It's a wonderful opportunity for interdisciplinary research. So how might we stimulate that? So particularly in the social sciences and the humanities, one way of doing it is to build little research clusters around fellows' interests, and ideally where those fellows' interests overlap with each other. And so that's something that we can do where you don't have big infrastructure, labs and buildings over in the central university, but you do have a community in a college where it is possible to not only work but also meet over lunch or over dinner and have discussions that lead to new avenues of research. We could then think of what to do on the sciences, and this is looking forward a little bit, where we don't think the same model would work there, but we do think things like the Graduate Centre might be a useful adjunct to support our graduates and our postdocs. And as you go on the tours, you'll notice, you'll be told about Albion House, which is an area of this whole complex which we have yet to develop. So there is the opportunity to take these sorts of ideas and develop them over the next 4 or 5 years. So what have we got in the terms of research clusters? So this idea was really only started about 15 months ago. We already have 3. So just to give you an idea, you can look them all up on the web, but that's the 3 that we have. Changing Character of War is perhaps the largest one, linking up with our history fellows and in fact with our law fellows and with, in a couple of years' time, with our new fellow in philosophy who does ethics. We already have one on impact, so Islamic philosophy and theology, again because this college is very strong in Arabic, we're also strong in theology. And human rights is our new Professor Sandy Fredman, and it's a James Martin Institute that's going to be based in the college. And interestingly, all of these can probably talk to each other. These two are already talking to each other. So you get an idea of how you can stimulate research activities so that colleges are not just dealing with undergraduates and tutorials, or not just trying to get the research graduates to have a social time. It really is stimulating things that would be very difficult to do in silos, in departments, and very difficult to do in, I have to say, most other universities on the planet, because they don't have colleges. So that, I think, hopefully gives you a little overview from the access side, the undergraduates, the graduates, and the research side, and some idea of the direction that we're heading in. Right, over to John.
Good morning, everyone. I start with an apology, which you can probably hear already. I was a little under the weather this morning, and I'm afraid my voice is going to be quite painful for all of you, but it's not hurting me particularly, so bear with it. I'm going to talk about the college's finances, and I'm then going to touch on the new build project about which you've heard a great deal already. So if we start with the college finances, the first thing to explain is that, as I think I told this meeting last year, we now present our financial information in a format which complies with the Charity Commission regulations. That's not always ideal, and we actually attach more importance to our management accounts in that respect. So bear with us in terms of what I think are some of the anomalies that the Charity Commission forces us to comply with. And the first page actually, I think, goes to that biggest anomaly. It means that any capital donations one receives, whereas previously they went into our balance sheet, now they have to come into our profit and loss account. So you see this year that our incoming resources, income, went up from 2.9 million to 6.4 million. But the main driver, as you can see on the second line, is the donations, and particularly the capital donations, which rose to 6.4 million. And of those donations, 2.8 million were actually for the Bridging Centuries campaign, and around 3 million were for the endowment. So that was very encouraging on both of those counts. If we look at the cost side, And again, this is the charity commission format, which doesn't help us a great deal because as a charity, one has to show how much money one is spending on raising money. We put all our costs of our conference income and things like that in it, so it's not terribly helpful. But overall, I think a steady position on the cost side. The 600,000 of the 900,000 increase is actually a contra to the capital donation we received to fund our new post in physics. Part of that money needed to fund the university's side of that, so it came into us and went straight out to the university, which was part of the arrangement. So that rather inflated the cost increase. If you take that out, it's a much lower figure and represented some investment we've made in support costs, getting ready for this new building, and also with the kitchen hall refurbishment having been finished, we needed a little bit more resource in there. If we then bring this to the final position, net incoming resources, or what you might call profit, increased to 5.3 million. When we deduct a modest loss on our investment portfolio of 700,000, that resulted in what's called a net movement in profit in funds, a net profit in other terms of £4.6 million. The management accounts, which I said I attach more importance to, showed us breaking even, so we exclude all the main capital donations and just focus on the day-to-day side, if you like. That showed us breaking even, which, as a charity, I think is exactly where we would like to be. And we're very pleased with the performance overall, because obviously the economy at large is in some difficulty, but our conference income in particular actually increased quite well this year, and we're looking for it to increase even more this year, as it is doing actually. So I think generally we feel pretty comfortable with both the income, the costs, and the prognosis going forward. If we just look at the balance sheet, we take the £4.6 million of net movement in funds, the net profit, if you like. That meant our net assets rose to 60 million in the balance sheet. There's a lot of assets in there which have no value, actually. You know, the value of the main college is written off, so it's a somewhat fallacious figure, really. But our fixed assets rose by 11.9 million, which is obviously reflecting the continuing spend over the last financial year on the new build project, as it's been we've been paying the checks to the contractor and putting the asset onto our balance sheet. A word about our investment portfolio. Investments increased by 3.6% to 39.5 million. Actually, as we speak, the figure is pushing towards 42 million because the stock markets have picked up in recent months. But over last year, there was this modest decrease in line with the market, which brought down the net movement to 2.1 million. Our overall return on investments, and it's what we call the total return, where we add in the income we received, the dividends, together with any capital growth, in last year a modest capital loss, we come up with what's called the total return figure. Our target is to achieve RPI plus 4%. Last year we didn't achieve that. We only had a 1% total return, which is obviously unsatisfactory. But I think one has to attach a lot more importance to the overall trend. And actually, over the last decade, we're a little bit behind the trend, but not much actually. And if we had a good year, which seems to be brewing a little bit in the stock market, but when one comes out of a recession, difficult question to know when that's going to be on this one. But stock markets often rise by about 20% per annum for a couple of years after a recession. So a little fillip like that would put us back on track. So we're not panicking. This year we're well ahead of that figure. But it's an important figure for us to keep an eye on. So overall, I think our balance sheet is a very, very healthy one. Now a word or two about the new build project. I looked at my slides from last year, and one of them said, this time last year, looking forward to another 9 months of construction, that it was tight but doable. Little did I know how true the tight bit was going to prove to be. We had, as I think everyone knows, the wettest weather in Oxford for 100 years. And I think also the complexity and I think the richness of the project. I think as you go around, you'll see what an attractive project this has been in terms of the architecture and the design. But it's complex. There's no standard bits to it, or very few. So that complexity and the constrained nature of the site put quite a lot of pressure on the contractor and the design team. It became apparent around July time, by which time we committed to the students that they would have their rooms in the start of October, that we were under some pressure. So the contractor then had to up the resources, and for the last 2 months before October, they were literally working round the clock. Literally, it was 24/7 for about 2 months. We got the students into their bedrooms by the seat of our pants, literally very, very tight. In some cases, the builders were leaving in the morning and the students were arriving in the afternoon. And I kid you not. So it was very, very tight, but we got them in. It also meant, because there was ongoing works continuing in the outside spaces and what we call the common parts, that the students unfortunately did have to live in something of a building site, but we gave them a 50% rent reduction, which brought a lot of cooperation on their part. But they have actually been very understanding. Work on the other inside spaces is about to finish. You're sitting in one of the areas that was formally handed over to us yesterday. You see, we do things in a very tight but doable way. But most of the internal spaces, the common parts, have now been handed over to us, one or two little exceptions. And then the work is still continuing with some of the stonework and some of the outside spaces. We have a garage on Littlegate Street, and there's work in the Campion Hall side of the fence. So that's going to take another month or so. But we're pretty nearly there. This one hurts me a bit because I'm a proud man, but we have gone over budget by about £800,000. It is the impact of the complexities and the pressures I've talked about. That's within a 3% overspend, and actually in the construction contract we made an allowance for a 5% contingency. If we'd had a 10% contingency, that would have covered it. But I think it's better to work with a small contingency and keep pressure on. So overall, I think we're probably recognised as satisfactory. And also because the model we had for financing this, as Giles mentioned, was to have a long-term loan together with the donated money. The long-term loan, we had made certain assumptions about how much that would cost us. We actually got it at a percentage point lower than we had projected, and the financial benefit of that is pretty much the same as the overspend, so it's sort of neutral. And just finish on a word about the loan. It is 12.8 million. We took out a long-term loan of over 28 years at an interest rate of 4.65%. So, we feel that we fixed it, so we know where we stand. I think it's a pretty good rate to have for a long-term loan like that. And as Giles mentioned, we now have to pay it off. It will be financed, obviously, from the student income, the rental they pay, but also our conference business. And our conference business is leaping up, actually. The bookings, as our new conference manager has been showing these facilities, are literally leaping up. I mean, people see these facilities and see it as a very attractive place to come and bring a conference to. So overall, I think our financial position is very sound. There are inevitably some stretches and demands on us, but I think they're all manageable. And if you want further information, you will find it in this. Also, if you go onto our website, on the front page of the website, you'll find a button that you can click to get the full report and accounts. There's about 30-odd pages of that, but if you were minded to have a look at it, you will find it on the website. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Many wonderful adjectives are used to describe our wonderful bursar, who's helped to give us all this, but tight but doable is not bad, actually, to describe John. I think we're all very, very proud of what he's managed to achieve for us today. My only apology this morning is for the tie I'm wearing. I've had 3 people ask me what sort of a Pembroke tie is that. And the answer to that, I'm sorry for confusing you, is it's not. It's just given to me by somebody who knew I liked stripy ties. So if it isn't already a Pembroke College tie of some sort, well, maybe it ought to be. So, well, as I said in the annual report, last year was an outstanding year for philanthropy to the college. And I do mean philanthropy in the sense of giving, not just the things that we do in the development office to stimulate that, and you'll hear a bit of that this morning. This is the one occasion in the year when we are allowed to strut our stuff a little bit and tell you what we're up to. But essentially, it was a wonderful year for people giving to us for windfalls as well as the campaign that we orchestrated. And that was mainly achieved in, you've heard the figure already from John, another 6.4 million of fundraising this year, which was a lot higher than in previous years and a lot higher than the average. And the main components of that were some big legacies, and I'll talk to you about those in a second, some new fellowship funding, and you heard about that from Mark, it was mainly physics, and of course the buildings. Final stages of the Bridging Centuries campaign, I think there was a lot of excitement there which really boosted the campaign numbers. The legacies were exceptionally generous, we had them in this year, and of course there was renewed interest now in our academic ambitions as we get to the end of the buildings project. So if we look at Bridging Centuries, the campaign, our target has always stayed at 17 million. By the end of last year, we had raised 13 million of that, and today, extra big push, we're up at 97% of that figure, in fact, and as John was pleased to be the recipient of this, 14.2 million of those pledges were actually came in cash. Why was it such a good boost to this last year to the fundraising? Well, the gap was closing. People could see that our bridgeometer on the website was filling up. The buildings were going up visibly. The mailings intensified and so on. It was just a very exciting time. And there was a big buzz from our activities, I think. And Catherine Beckett will tell you all about that machinery in a moment. I think actually, as the buildings started to appear and take shape this last year, a number of people who, well, in some cases hadn't had much to do with Pembroke before, were very inspired to see that and to see what it meant to us. And that actually did prompt some very big donations. And of course, a feast of naming opportunities, and you're going to see some of those live as you go round. The major gifts that we received last year, a family called Lee from Hong Kong. Well, you're sitting in a building that they helped to name after Uncle Harold, who studied at Pembroke as an undergraduate in the 1930s. Very, very generous family indeed. They also named a beautiful assembly room that is just above this auditorium after Harold. The Pichettes, a Canadian couple who studied here in the 1980s and actually met at Pembroke, they have given us in 7 figures to the campaign over all its years of operation, and you're sitting, of course, in the Pichette Auditorium today. And then a newcomer to Pembroke this last year, Sheikh Mahfouz from Saudi Arabia, who came to Pembroke to develop an association with Oxford and with a fine British institution. And again, he was absolutely turned on by touring the building site as it was then, and just seeing what it was going to do for us. But of course, those were the major gifts, but everything counted, and we will keep on pumping home that message. Everything counted. Gifts of all sizes made up our total, and the thank yous go to everybody. And again, we will focus on regular giving shortly with Catherine. The legacies, well, the main ones were from an alumnus called David Perkin, who was here in the 1950s, who left us a very beautiful property in South London, which the proceeds from which are going to be added to our permanent endowment. And you heard how important endowment is for the college going forward. Rodney Fitzgerald, who was a great city livery man and a great sponsor of sports charities in the City of London, he left us a very generous 6-figure sum in his will, which he wanted us to use for the endowment of sports awards and just bringing proper attention to sport in Pembroke College, so we'll be able to make our support for those things more consistent in future with a number of Fitz Awards. His name was Fitz rather than Fitzgerald, and that's what we're calling those little bursaries. And finally, Peter Farthing, who was an alumnus here in the 60s. Peter was probably one of the most devoted and engaged alumni of Pembroke in the post-war period, spending the last 10 years of his life as an advisory fellow on our governing body. So he was really part of the college until his untimely death last year. and you will see that we have a splendid cafe bearing his name as a token of his love of the Pembroke community. Our academic ambitions last year, well, the new fellowships you've heard about, physics, that was endowed with a 7-figure gift from Chris Rockos, who's already a big giver to the campaign, and the quadrangle outside with all its terraces is going to be named for Chris. And you should know that we did a lot of work last year to get our theology fellowship fully endowed. Theology is a very important subject for Pembroke, and I'm happy to say now all the money for that was paid up before Christmas this year. And of course, in our fundraising after the building, which as you heard is a great platform for further academic ambition, our emphasis is going to be increasingly on the academic side of academic objectives of fundraising, and turn to more fellowship endowment, postgraduate scholarships, and all those great things, as well as to supporting our access activity. Now, our offering to alumni, what do we do? How do we keep the place exciting for all of you and others? Well, our effort is basically aimed at creating mutual interest. It's not just for fundraising. We want the events to be fun and interesting, to be with plenty of variety, and we want to have them in as many places as we can in the UK and around the world. And as you may have noticed, today's annual meeting is actually being filmed, and this is so that our American and other friends around the world have a chance to see and catch up with Pembroke through this important meeting. And just a few pictures, if you can see them, of what the events were in the past 12, 18 months. Very nice law dinner in a temple, a careers mentoring fest which took place in the college, alumni and our current undergraduates, a city breakfast, a concert in the Royal College of Music that was our London reception last year, and then Pembroke on the Sofa, a wonderful live chat show that we hold 2 or 3 times a year up in London, and is proving to be a real wow. And finally, of course, all those publications that we put out, electronic and hard copy, we are always eager to have your feedback on those. We're always ready to respond to suggestions for change. And now I think over to Catherine for something about regular giving.
Thanks, Andrew. Andrew's asked me to say a little bit about regular giving this morning. In previous years, I've sometimes come to talk to you at this meeting about the annual fund and the fantastic things that it's doing for us in our day-to-day lives here at Pembroke. But this year, I don't just want to talk about the annual fund, although it has remained incredibly important to the students and to the academics throughout the year. I also want to talk about the campaign, because this year we saw our regular giving hugely increase, and it was incredibly exciting, and a lot of that was to do with the campaign. During the year, we really stepped up our activities to try and get people to engage with the campaign and what's going on back here at Pembroke, and we made a little bit more noise than we usually do. So we started the year with a new newsletter called The Bridge to keep people up to date with what was going on with the new buildings project. We made some films. The first one we made was Remember Pembroke. We had a lot of fun going around interviewing fellows, past and present, and getting their thoughts and reminiscences on how things have been changing and what their hopes are for Pembroke in its future. And lots of people were buying into that. That film was viewed by about 1,300 people worldwide, alumni and friends. So that was a great encouragement to us to see people interested in where we're going. Then we produced the little flyer that you can see there on the right to give more information about how people can make their own mark in the new buildings. As Andrew mentioned, you'll see this for yourself as you go around. Never seen so many names on the wall of Pembroke, and it's a real delight and a real pleasure to see those every day. That was wonderful. We got such a great response to that flyer. It raised over £100,000 just putting it in with last year's annual report. People have been incredibly generous to Pembroke this year. And then, of course, we had our telethon, as Andrew mentioned. That was a really fantastic 3-week experience. It was much bigger than our usual annual fund endeavours. We recruited 23 students this year. The bursar toured them around the building site as it was then, and they were trained in all manner of things, and they were incredibly enthusiastic. Very many of them are now living in the brand new bedrooms around this quad, so they had a little bit of an interest. But they were absolutely fantastic. You may meet a few of them today. They're coming to join. A few are coming to join us after lunch today to help show you around the new buildings for yourselves. They had a list of about 3,500 alumni around the world who they were trying to call, and a whole pile of naming opportunities at their disposal. We invented a few new ones just to make sure that everyone, regardless of their age and their circumstances, could hopefully try and have that if they wanted to. And we were so pleased that about 550 alumni over that 3-week period made a pledge to the campaign. Some of those were £20 gifts from students who'd literally just walked out the door last year, and some of those were £20,000 gifts from people who'd been gone for a long time, hadn't necessarily engaged with the college much, but thought that maybe they could play their part and provide us with another bedroom. It was really, really exciting. I think the students really had a really good time. I hope so. You can ask them for yourself. But over that 3-week period, they raised another £475,000 for the campaign, which is just immense. I mean, that's more than double what we usually raise in an annual fund telethon, and I just think the buzz was really brilliant. They were fantastic. So thank you to everybody who answered the phone, if any of you are here today. Thank you, it really helps. Once we'd finished chasing up those gifts and recovering from the telethon, we made a final call for our naming opportunities at the sort of slightly lower end of the scale, because we had to order the plaques, anticipating the end of the project. And doing that audit was a little bit scary for the person ordering the plaques, but it was also a lot of fun. We had 147 names on the special panel that we've put in the college bar. Please feel free to go and have a look after lunch. Lots of those were really recent graduates, so that was incredibly encouraging. We had sold out by that stage of the seats that you're sitting on today. Each of those people gave £1,000 donations. There are 116 of them around you, which have little plaques on, so that was a real pleasure. Although a little bit tricky to balance and make sure we'd only sold 116 and not 120. You'll see as well there's a new panel in the bridge garden as you walk across to the bridge, and we'll see that again on the way back to lunch. There are 63 names on there. There are 40 new flagstones going down next week. I'm really sorry if you did one of those. They're going in on Tuesday. But all of those things together, and the smaller gifts as well, or the people who gave those gifts but weren't really interested in naming opportunities. It's not everyone's bag, and that's fine. All of those things together raised an absolutely amazing £500,000 towards this campaign. So if ever there was evidence that any gift really makes a difference in this college, there it is. That's a big whack of our campaign. So thank you to everyone who engaged with that. We didn't stop there, of course, because we never quite finished until we reached the 17 million. So this year we've been carrying on, making a lot more noise and coming through your letterbox again. We were very grateful to our campaign board, 9 or 10 of our really generous alumni who've really helped with this project, who put their own money where their mouth is again. They've all been very generous. But that to encourage even more people to get involved, in September and October we ran a match funding scheme with them for people who hadn't given yet, and that brought another 100 alumni donors on board with the campaign and raised an awful lot more money. So that was really fantastic. Again, it kept the excitement. We made another film. I'm terribly sorry, but the licensing for the music, the lovely 80s pop music that we used for that, has expired. So if you want to see it, you'll need to ask me for a private copy, because I can't have it for public view on the website anymore. But that was good fun. So that's lots of shots of the buildings really just making it the type of doable film we probably should have called it. And then we produced another issue of The Bridge, and we won't stop there. We'll keep sending news and we'll keep listing the names of the donors who've supported us. So as I say, it's been really exciting year and a half, I suppose, with watching regular giving just go from strength to strength. One of the nicest things as well was seeing how people, like many of you in this room today, who've been supporting the college for many years through our annual fund, how many of you were really generous enough to help us even more. Many people on the telethon who already give to the annual fund were kind enough to give to the campaign as well. And that makes a big difference, because we still need the annual fund for our day-to-day activities and to engage with the current students. So while we were building the buildings, we didn't want to forget about them and their needs every single day. So thank you to everyone who continued to support the annual fund. £282,000 was donated last year, and over £250,000 of that was unrestricted, and that allowed us to use it where we most needed it, which in the last year included quite a large chunk there, as you can see, 52% for academic resources. That allows us to make sure that every student has the teaching hours that they need, and the fellows are supported by others who can come in and give some extra teaching where necessary. And it goes towards library resources and all kinds of other things. Student accommodation, yes, we were building a whole pile of new accommodation, but the old stuff wasn't getting any younger, and it still needs to be looked after. The Geoffrey Arthur building is now 25 years old, and we've just started a programme of refurbishments of staircases down there, and it's still very, very popular with the students, so we need to keep that in a good condition. Student financial support, you heard Mark speak about how important especially our graduate scholarships are for our students, and the annual fund really helps with that at the moment. The small 3% there that I've listed under student activities, this is the little bit of the annual fund that we keep back every year for the students to tell us what activities they want to engage in that will really make a difference and give them the extra opportunities that we think that you as donors would like them to have. So it's amazing what they can do with a £200 grant, you know. It's 2 years worth of a new dance society. We've started a new literary periodical last year. Well, I didn't. The students will come forward with these ideas themselves. We're pleased to support the chapel choir when they go on tour abroad. The MCR now have a wonderful football team called the Smurfs, and so they have lovely blue football kit. Thank you, everyone. But these are the kinds of things that just make it a real pleasure for the students, and you know, they can get involved, they can have ideas, and it's the beauty of somewhere like Pembroke. Someone else wants to do it too, and they can get a little bit of support to get going. So across the campaign and the annual fund, these two needs, the regular giving was pretty fantastic. And the most encouraging thing, I think, for us in the development team, and hopefully for you as well, because so many of you here have been supporting the college for a number of years, and I hope that you feel encouraged to see others coming to join you. So I thought I'd just give you the history from the last kind of 7 years, I think it is, we're covering here, just so that you can see how things have been improving. Way back in 2005-06, when we were just starting out on the road with the annual fund, we had about 5% of our alumni giving a gift that year. 2 years later, when we started out on the telethon road, we saw that increase to about 13%. We carried on, and in 2009-10 that went up to 18%. And I'm delighted to be able to tell you that last year we hit 24%, which is really, really fantastic. To put that in a wee bit of context, as far as we know, Oxford colleges have the best and broadest alumni support bases of any educational institutions in the UK, and they're comparable to the best in the US. The best college last year was Exeter, which was a big surprise, because the last few years it's always been Univ on the high street who've been leading the way. But last year Exeter stole a march on them, and they declared a figure of 37% of their alumni supporting. Univ are still going strong at 36%. And bringing up third place, yours truly, Pembroke College's alumni. Really amazing. And I think that the two ahead of us should watch out for the years to come. I hope, anyway. So that just leaves me to say thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you again, because it's just amazing. Those are our telethon callers. If you see any of them around this afternoon, you can ask them for the real story. But they would want to say again, thank you, and thank you very much.
You're right, it's a little bit early, so the figures for this current exercise that we've just gone through in December, we haven't really seen a detailed breakdown of that yet. So we know the overall number has stayed up for Oxford. The other thing it's worth saying is that Oxford has got the most generous package for bursaries and fee waivers. So if there are shifts in where people are going, Oxford is actually very well placed. We would become a very attractive proposition compared to every other university. And that was a decision the university made when the fees were fixed a couple of years ago, and that has been reiterated. So we're not going to be changing that position for certainly the next year, and I would probably guess another couple of years. The university is also about to commission its own research, because the thing that has been missing in these very turbulent times is there is no really good data. And there's a lot of data that, let's say, that is publicly available. And so it is possible that we may actually have to commission and pay for relevant statistics if indeed you can get access to that data. And just to give you an example, the sort of information one might like would be the background of the students that are applying. There are figures we can use from Polar or Acorn. The metrics that they use keep changing. And so it's never clear that you're dealing with exactly the same information year on year. And it's never clear that it really is the right information, particularly if you think of London, where moving a street, the postcode is the same, but the background is massively different. So there's a lot of complexity in there that you really would love to be on top of, but I don't think at the moment we don't have the statistics, and I don't think even if we had the data, you would be able to tease out the trends very easily. So I think we, like everybody else, are concerned, but certainly the first year the numbers haven't dropped, and as I say, Oxford is very well placed. Should people be debt averse, this is a good university to apply. It should not put people off. Yes, we are. In fact, that's one of the things I should have mentioned. We're one of the very few schemes where we are logging all of the stages. So we are getting some statistics that are building up over the 4 years, so we can say where people go. What I should also say is it's not just restricted to the people that come on the Pembroke scheme. So all of the others that were on that scheme are going to various Russell Group universities. But the Pembroke scheme itself has left to other spin-offs. So B6 now has links with, I think, 16 other universities, including Cambridge. Clare's Cambridge are involved as well. And their figures going to Russell Group universities have gone up by 500%. So part of the idea is we will be doing the top-end intensive course for people to give them a reasonable stab at Oxbridge, but below that there is a whole raft of activities. And I mean, to be honest, it seems to us that parachuting Oxford into a place like that really does send out an incredibly strong positive signal. Everybody does sit up and take notice. So even though our scheme itself is only really dealing with a small number of people, the knock-on effects, the ripple effect, is enormous. No, we can't track that yet, and because of the cycle in the applications that, for example, we were dealing with this time round, a lot of those decisions would have been taken before any of the publicity would have been out there. But if I was honest, and I think it's something that has already been referred to in the presentations, at the moment we are not getting anything like the benefit, the profile that we think we should be getting from these schemes. And it's to do with the communication strategy, how well the website works, all of these things. And that's another area that we will be spending a lot of effort on in the next couple of years. It's all very well doing these schemes, and they, in my mind, academically, they are absolutely right. But if we do want to then gain the benefit, we must get that message out there more widely. So that is something that we just have to fix.
Yes, absolutely. Firstly, to say that about 4 years or so ago, we decided to review our investment managers. We were by then with a firm which had variously been called Mercury Asset Management, which became Merrill Lynch, which became BlackRock, and we were not overly impressed by their performance. It was okay, but nothing special, and we didn't actually think the relationship management was very well done, so we thought we had every right to go out to tender, as it were. We do have an investment committee with outside investment specialists who sit on it. They're all Pembroke alumni. And we also used a specialist firm who identified suitable investment management firms for a college like ourselves to use. So that consultant came up with a short list of about 5 or 6 firms that we might consider. We were very clear in our objective, and our objective is that they should achieve a long-run rate of return of 4% real, above inflation. We, by the way, set ourselves an internal, we assume we're going to achieve 3.5%. So there's a bit of a discount in our financial modelling, so we're on the safe side. We then interviewed and reviewed those 6 firms, and we concluded that that we would go with 2 of them. And as we sit here today, we've got about £16 million with each of them. Out of that 40 million, 41 million. The 2 firms concerned are called Saracen, which is it's actually got a Swiss heritage of a Swiss bank, but it's also got local partners with their own investment stake in it in London, and Newton. They are both, you might accuse me of the herd instinct, but they're both very well used by charities and Oxford colleges, so we're not alone in using their services. We meet as an investment committee every quarter, and if there are things we need to do in the interim, we can meet virtually. I think it is important to keep an eye on the long-run rate of return. I mean, you will get market fluctuations. We've been through a very bloody time on the stock market. As we said to them, we're not into a short-term gain. We've decided, we're just actually our last investment committee meeting, that now is the time, 4 years in, to start having a look at their performance. But it's not something you should do every year or two, because, frankly, it encourages them to focus on short-term behaviours, whereas we want them to focus on a long-term trend. And as I said, year to date, it's looking quite satisfactory, because the stock markets have been bouncing upwards since the summer. The Saracen is very heavily equity focused, actually, so they're at about 75% equities. Newton is about 60% equities, actually, and is much more heavily, it's got a lot more cash. I think Newton have been playing a waiting game. I think they're less convinced about the future prospects of the stock market. All of our investment managers, and I think almost all investment managers in the country, missed the bond rally. Everyone thought that actually when interest rates hit all-time record lows, that would then was it, and they carried on going down. So those returns, which forces up the capital value of bonds. So our investment managers missed that. Most did. A few didn't, and if you were invested with them, you'd have done well. But overall, I think we're satisfied, but it's not something we're ever complacent about.
John, there's just a little bit also in the Oxford University.
Yes,
Management Company.
we have a modest investment of about £3 million in the university's own endowment fund as well, and that has the same objectives.
The short answer to your question is extensive, very extensive. Because for all the obvious reasons, and I can only say that for large donations, this college takes the view that not only should we do our own due diligence here and satisfy ourselves, that's to say myself and the development director, but then we take it to a committee of governing body, and then to governing body itself, where the full details of our due diligence work is disclosed and discussed. In addition to that, we take the option that is available to us, which a lot of colleges do not take, and I do not understand why, but that's their lookout. We are also able, for big donations, to put the matter to the university committee, the committee of council called Committee to Review Donations, and they will then bring to bear the university resource, which exists, as you would expect, all the time for all manner of donations coming into the university. So we put significant donations from new people through that mechanism as well. And the governing body has taken the view, quite rightly, I think, that we need to be satisfied, and we also need to get that additional check from the university end. So it's a matter we take extremely seriously. I would just say that some of you may know that I will be retiring at the end of July. So this is the last annual general meeting of the college that I will be hosting. And just to say that being Master of the College has been a very enjoyable and memorable experience for me. I think and hope that you will feel from this morning's presentation and other things that you will have picked up in recent weeks and months that the college is in a good place, but as we tried to emphasise this morning, there's a lot more to do. We've got the plans in place to do that. I think we've got the enthusiasm and the direction and the people to drive that forward. So there's everything to play for. And for those of you that I don't happen to see, again, whether it's at the Osselton lunch next month or at the garden party or at some other event, thank you very much for your support over the 12 years that I've been Master. And I'm sure you'll go on supporting the college in the wonderful way you have done today. So thank you very much to you.